Well, how many of you know the difference between a noun and an adjective and a verb now? Did you learn that today? I guided them away from using those words because I thought some of you probably forgot third grade English or whenever you learned that. Some teacher's gonna shoot me an email. That's ninth grade. Whatever, it's fine. So, but you know, every year at Christmas, we start with creating a list, right? I mean, that's how the season usually begins. Sometime, depending how old your kids are or how much you like stuff, it begins earlier and earlier in the year. Sometimes you keep a running list year round, right? My birthday is right before Christmas, so usually a couple of days before my birthday, I create a list for both just because I don't like to think about it. But some people start that list back in July. And so every year we kind of come up with this list and we begin creating that, and then the day comes and we get gifts, and sometimes they're what we expect, and sometimes they're not, right? But every year there's a gift under the tree that we just didn't expect. And most of the time, we weren't all that excited about it. You think back to the moment, maybe when you were opening, the last time you were opening a gift, you ripped it open, the expectations were high, and once you took off the wrapping paper, the excitement turned to disappointment, because instead of the gift being what you had hoped for, something you worked hard to put on that list, you found socks and underwear, and not the good kind of either. And it's a gift maybe that we really need, but we weren't hoping for. You know, this is really the true essence of the first Christmas. The first Christmas, Jesus was the gift that we all need, and everyone in the first century where he was born needed, but no one really expected, and frankly, nobody really got excited about. In fact, as we look today and throughout this series, we're gonna discover that socks and underwear has more in common with Jesus than your feet and socks. That it wasn't gonna go any further than that, but you know what I'm saying, right? We're gonna discover that it has a lot more in common. Think about that time when you were a kid at that gift you really wanted. For me, I was a late bloomer in the video game world, and so for me it was a Nintendo. Does anyone remember the Nintendo, like the ancient old school kind, where you had to stuff all sorts of stuff in the little opening just to get it to work? You had to prop it open, put games in there, and then like another game on top, and sometimes a piece of cardboard. Am I the only one that worked really hard to get video games to work? Right, but this is the Nintendo that also had a secret password, and it was your breath. Because you would get the cartridge out and you'd blow on it, and somehow your breath was the password to make it work. You'd then put it in and you would buy these things brand new and have to do all these techniques. I always wanted a Nintendo when I was growing up. I never got one for Christmas. Some of you spoiled brats did. And so I'm still a little mad about it. But every year when we would be sitting around the Christmas tree, and my sister ruined it for everyone. I've got an older sister, she's about 7 years older, and she would have this, the first time she got down and was opening gifts, we used to have no process at Christmas. You know, maybe you have it this way, where you just run into the living room and you rip open the presents, right? She did that one year and she finished and she said to my parents, "That's it?" So we had this whole process. By the time I came along, everyone has to sit in a circle and we open one gift at a time, and it's a timer, right? My parents made us open gifts from 10 in the morning until 8 at night, so we didn't forget how many gifts we got. It was great. Clearly I've got some bitterness. Thank you guys for being here for my counseling. Yeah, it's great. But you know, I would think that the Nintendo was coming, and so there would be a gift, you know, kind of the best gift is always stashed behind the couch or the chair, and so I would think, that's my Nintendo, and I would open that thing up, the wrapping paper. They couldn't have possibly spent this much time on the wrapping paper unless it was really the right gift, and so, you know, every year I would open it and rip it open and expect to find a Nintendo, and generally my expectations were not met because I never got that for Christmas. It looked like what I wanted, but it wasn't really there. You know what, my mom the other day, hope she doesn't watch this, but the other day, my mom tagged me on Facebook. Can we let that sink in? I got on Facebook because when I was in college, Facebook came out, you had to be in college. So I was one of the first people on Facebook because I'm in college when it came out. But my mom tagged me on Facebook. It blew my mind. Like I literally had ooze coming out of my ear. I thought, there is no way my mom just tagged me on Facebook. But she tagged me on Facebook with a great non-biblical way to control your kids at the Christmas season. When I was thinking about gifts and talking about gifts, I thought, I'll share this with the church because you guys have kids. Christmas tip, wrap up the empty box, put them under the tree, and then every time your child acts up, throw one in the fireplace. Right? I mean, this is a great idea. Then I thought, wait a minute. Did you like this idea as my mother because you did stuff like this? I was thinking about scarring. I've got a lot of scarring. I'm working through some stuff. But my favorite example of an unmet expectation at Christmas is probably like in modern, or I guess it's not all that modern, I'm kind of old now, but is the picture of Ralphie in the Christmas Story where he opens up this gift and it's the pink bunny outfit. You know what I'm saying? You guys seen that? If you haven't seen it, it'll be on TBS for 24 straight hours right around Christmas. You won't miss it. But you think about in his mind, he was so excited about this gift, and once he got that paper off, it wasn't something that he even wanted. And the first Christmas was a lot like that. A gift the world largely needed, but it went unnoticed. No one got excited about it. It was kind of a letdown if you look at it with our own eyes and perspective and lens. But today I want to give you a different perspective, a different lens. You know, we don't normally turn to John this time of year, but I want to start in the book of John. You're going to find out why if you haven't read the beginning of John. It's not really a great picture of the Christmas story as we traditionally understand it. If you don't have a Bible, we'll put it on the screen. But what was so unexpected about the Christmas story? Maybe you're thinking, why does this even matter to me? Because it was so unexpected. I believe that if we understand what was so unexpected about it, it'll reshape how we approach Christmas. The good news is we still have a couple of weeks to reshape how we're going to approach Christmas. And so the unsung lesson, let me give you all my cards up front. I like you not to be wondering what we're going to talk about. The unsung lesson around the Christmas story is this, that God used the unexpected to teach the unexpected. God used the unexpected to teach the unexpected. Let me show you John chapter 1. And this may not sound all that revolutionary to you, but I want you to imagine this author, John, this is the entire Christmas story in his gospel, in his book. When he wrote the history of Jesus, this is all he wrote about his birth. He said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So John approaches things a little differently. We're going to come back and look at that. But John approaches things a little differently. Like Matthew, the author, he talks about the genealogy of Jesus. He said this is where Jesus came from, all the way back to Adam in the book of Genesis. Mark kind of jumps straight into the ministry of Jesus, and this is the great things that Jesus did. Luke gives a historical account and really paints the picture that many of us, if have ever been exposed to the Christmas story, is probably the version of the Christmas story we're most familiar with. But there's more to it than that, because when John painted his picture, it was so different. In fact, it began to become uncomfortable. The Christmas story is very uncomfortable. If we're honest and like a picture and a look, it's a really uncomfortable story. John goes all the way back to creation. He wants us to understand that Jesus is fully God and fully man, which doesn't make any sense. How do you fit 2 cups of water in a 1-cup container? I don't know. I'm not God, and there's an element of faith in this whole thing. So we start with that. But he begins by going back to creation and paints a picture of the divinity of Jesus. So let's look at John chapter 1. Let me give you, here's a good picture. He says, in the beginning was the Word. Now the Greek word for word is logos, and so it's spelled like logos, so don't mispronounce that if you ever read Greek. But in the beginning was the Word, the logos, which simply means an expression or a declaration of a thought. So in the beginning was the expression or declaration. And the expression or declaration was with God, and the expression or declaration was God. So many times we talk about a comfortable picture and story where Jesus was born at Christmas. But Jesus wasn't born at Christmas. What John is saying was Jesus wasn't born at all. He's saying Jesus was born in a physical sense, but that's not the beginning of his life. He doesn't have a beginning because in the beginning he was. The expression of Jesus existed way before Jesus was ever born. And so there is no beginning to Jesus, just like there's not a beginning to God. That's what he's saying. That's where he's starting off. That's the picture he's beginning to paint at the very beginning. Now, I'm not trying to be critical of God's gift giving, but when we look at the Christmas story, and we say Jesus is the gift for humanity, for mankind, it almost seems like we can understand where men get their gift-giving tendencies from. You know what I'm saying? Because men, in the most extreme form, you can find, if you need a girl and you're looking for a girl, Christmas Eve shopping is not the place to go. Not a lot of women shopping. Not a meat market, just dudes, right? Some of you are gonna get that on Tuesday, and that's fine. Tuesday's a good day, right? But I mean, it's the idea, right? It's the men who are going shop. It's the men you find at Love's down on the interstate, whatever town you're trying to buy a CB radio, take it home and explain to their wife, well, this is because I just wanted to find a new way to tell you how much I loved you. That's your Christmas present, right? I mean, because that's all they had. That was over $100. I don't know, whatever their gift amount was. And so you start thinking about that. That almost seems like that's how God gave the gift of Jesus. You're like, what are you talking about? Is this sacrilegious? No, let's look at it. Luke seems to present a story of the birth that's not as well thought out. In the Christmas story, the hotel is full. Mary's 9 months pregnant and is charged to walk down a long road because of an evil king. Why is there even an evil king in this story? This is supposed to be about the birth of Jesus. So she has to walk down a crowded Roman road where people, between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, where people are passing one another. They're all trying to get to the same place, right? She gets there. There's no room in the inn. She ends up in a cave or a barn or whatever where she decides that that's the best place to sleep. Think about, this is just a side note, but think about as a man, right? You're trying to provide for your family. The best you can do for your 9-month pregnant wife is a cave with a bunch of dirty, smelly animals. And it seems like when we look at this picture, they don't even have enough money to sacrifice for a lamb, which would be a traditional thing to do for somebody who had given birth. Luke chapter 2, verse 7 says Jesus was wrapped in rags, not silk, not anything nice. But why? It doesn't make any sense. What's the reason behind it? Because if we're looking at it and comparing it, which is always a dangerous thing to do in Scripture, but comparing this Christmas story with how you and I process and understand this version that we have seen in our nativity scenes for 1,000 years, it seems like it doesn't make sense. Jesus is the subject of the New Testament, right? He's what we all talk about when you read the New Testament, but he's also the subject of the Old Testament. He's the focal point of the Bible. He's the focal point of our timeline, no matter what your religion is. There's this period between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. It's called the intertestamental period. Snazzy, right? Somebody in the seminary thought that up. A 400-year period. The whole period is identified by looking for what would be Jesus. They're looking, where is Jesus? And they don't know necessarily Jesus is who they're looking for. They know they're looking for a Savior. They're looking for Emmanuel. They're looking for God with us. And what they find is so different. It doesn't make any sense. It's uncomfortable. We expect the Christmas story to be comfortable and trouble-free, but that's just not the case. That's not the picture we get. You think about Mary, and they set this out, I know, a little quickly. You can't even see baby Jesus. I'm gonna have to get in here because we know a new mother would never be this far away from her baby. Much more accurate, right? Yeah, and we got the steer who's, I don't know what, but we'll just go with this. Maybe that's close enough. Is that good? You can't see it anyway, it's fine. But what we know, when we think about this picture, we think about maybe Mary thought when she was told by an angel that the Son of God resides in your womb. That's the word. When the Son of God is residing in your womb, she probably had some expectations, right? Oh, sweet. This is gonna be the easiest pregnancy of all time, right? No morning sickness. Wait a minute, how am I gonna explain to my family that I am a virgin? That's gonna be awkward at Thanksgiving, right? I mean, just think about that. Or Ramadan, whatever Jewish holiday, right? You think about that, I mean, and then supernatural epidural. That's exactly what I'm gonna be experiencing, right? I mean, think about the expectations she could have come up with in her mind, none of which would have been met, right? And so she could have had all that, but instead she didn't, because God came in a way that was different than our expectations. Why? Because he wanted to identify with our struggles. God wanted to identify with our struggles. Some people see God as totally detached from reality as human beings are on earth. And much like you talk to somebody who's uber rich, like a billionaire, multi-billions of dollars, right? And when you talk to somebody like that, and not that I ever have, but if maybe you ever do, or you think about it, they don't understand the concept of not being able to pay your mortgage. Right? They don't understand that there's this disconnect between making a decision to make the car payment or feed your kids that week, or pay for gas or food, right? That's not even a thought on their mind. They don't get that. And God said, that's not the approach that I'm going to take as the God of the universe, even though I'm entitled to it. We think God might be that way because of the whole streets of gold thing. Like he never understood problems or struggles, but he paints a picture in the Christmas story that's much different. The beauty of the Christmas story is that Jesus Christ, God, became fully attached and associated with our struggles. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 reminds us that Jesus is able to sympathize with our weakness. How's that happen? Because he became fully God, fully human, and he lived here on earth. He was born into a poor family. His dad was a carpenter. They lived paycheck to paycheck. He was born in a barn or a cave. His first bed was a feeding trough for animals. When he got older, he was homeless. As an adult, he would have no place to lay his head. Jesus can identify with our struggles. Jesus knows injustice. He knows betrayal. He knows pain, hurt. Jesus washed the feet of the guy who would get him crucified, knowing that he would get him crucified after he grew up watching people be crucified. Let that sink in. He chose a path that would allow us to relate to him. Maybe you have a family member you're dreading to see this Christmas season. You don't think Jesus grew up watching Mary and Joseph fight in the house or argue about how they were going to deal with Uncle Eddie, who still thinks that Mary wasn't a virgin when she had Jesus? I mean, you think about that. When Jesus was born, everything wasn't just perfect. It didn't fix everything. In fact, most of Jesus' family that came to believe in him didn't come to believe in him until after he died, rose again, and left, and other people started telling his story. I mean, this was a mess. Jesus understands a crazy family. Praise God, right? When you have somebody that you love that's hurt you, that's betrayed you, Jesus gets that. He's been there. He understands it. And that's the picture of the Christmas story that perhaps is most surprising and leaves us most in the dust. We just don't think about. So the top 7% of wage earners in our world, in our country rather, not the top 7% of people or humans or whatever, but the top 7% of wage earners in America give 30% less than the rest of the wage earners in the country. Think about that. Why is it that the uber rich, the top 7% wage earners in our country, give 30% less than the rest of us? And I can confidently say I'm in the bottom 93, right? Why is that? A study was done that indicates the reason is because that top 7% can't commiserate with the rest of us. They don't get it. They don't know what it's like to have to choose what to pay for, figure out where to have the month run out, or have their dollars run out before the month runs out. They don't get that in their minds. And there's exceptions to every rule. There's a lot of generous people that are very wealthy. But Jesus said, God said, that's not how we're going to do it. Jesus understands you because he lived a difficult and challenging experience, one that we find very uncomfortable embracing. A Christmas story that's not like maybe what we grew up hearing or have seen on TV. But the Christmas story is also an example of humility. We would expect God to enter the earth in some royal extravaganza, right? It's an example of humility. We would expect a giant royal extravaganza with people and parades and all sorts of stuff. The God of the universe is here. But in Luke chapter 2, verse 16, it indicates to us that Jesus was heralded. The people that talked about Jesus coming were a bunch of shepherds. They were a group of people that were lowly and despised. I mean, we have this picture and the sheep are white and not dirty and right? I mean, that's a normal nativity scene, but that's not the picture. Shepherds were like the underbelly of society. They smelled bad. They weren't awful people necessarily, but they weren't well liked. Nobody invited a shepherd over because they didn't want to smell up their house. And so those are the people. Look at Luke chapter 2. He says, the shepherds hurried off, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. And when they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told about them, about this child. Told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. And so Luke chapter 2 reminds us it was the shepherds who told about Jesus. It wasn't the New York Times or the most prestigious paper of their day, or even a King Herald to come down. It was King Herod who was living just 3 miles or so away from where Jesus was born, on top of a hill in a castle that stretched 90 feet in the air, living in all the opulent, luxurious lifestyle that you can imagine as a king of that day. This is the contrast that God offers us to help us understand that he wants to connect with you where you are. The writer in Philippians chapter 2, Paul, he writes this to help us understand a little better too. He says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of Christ Jesus. What was that mindset? What's the mindset of humility? Because if it's me, if I had to sum up Christmas in one word, it wouldn't be presents or wise men or shepherds. I'd probably sum it up in humility. Jesus, who being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage. He wasn't born in Herod's castle. He wasn't born in the capital of the Roman Empire. He picked a young girl that nobody knew to be his mom. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. The story didn't stop at the nativity scene. He continued to become obedient to death, even death on a cross. Humility that we're commanded to embrace with our life. That's what we see in the manger. A humility to sacrifice and serve others. It's a message that maybe we need to hear around our homes this time of year. We tend to look out for ourselves, right? And kids do this the best, especially when it comes to Christmas gifts. They always want to make sure there's the right number of gifts, the right volume, right? They're measuring and figuring out volume of their gifts. And they want to know that the gifts are the same price. And so, all of these things, they want to know that it's fair, the best, fairest it could be. And as parents, as adults rather, we don't necessarily do it that way. We're much more passive aggressive. Honey, don't buy me something, and then when you don't, because you listened to what she said, she's mad at you until June. Not that I'm talking from experience. That's not true. That's never actually happened. 2 out of 5 men are going to buy a gift for their spouse this year. 2 out of 5 men are going to buy a gift for their spouse this year that is actually for them. Yeah. This is true. This could be like a DVD player, a Blu-ray player. It could be a golf trip, a vacation to Mexico, whatever. It could be a new car or truck, right? One of those gifts is a video game system. Now, as one who's been deprived most of my life, I would like to know how you're pulling that off with your spouse. So if that's you, if you could visit with me afterwards, I want to pray for your marriage and then learn from you as well how I could get that. I'm just kidding. But that's not humility, right? Humility isn't self-centered and self-focused. And many times at Christmas, we get the Christmas story off and we end up focused on ourselves and our stuff and all of that. And the third thing, the Christmas story is a statement of love. It's a statement of love. We expect that the Christmas story would demonstrate the supremacy of Christ, how great he is, how big and strong and mighty God is, right? We expect the Christmas story to demonstrate his supremacy. But God wanted to make a statement of love for you and I instead. Jesus sacrificed intentionally to make very clear how far he would go to show you his love. Luke chapter 2, verse 7, I mentioned this earlier. It's just kind of a summary of the birth. It says, she, Mary, gave birth to her firstborn, a son, Jesus. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. This is the humility. This is the picture. This is the statement of love that comes from the Christmas story. Maybe like me, you grew up with a sweet and picturesque version of the nativity scene. What I love about this nativity scene that we borrowed is that it's weathered, right? It's not pristine, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But look, you've got Mary. In most nativity scenes, everybody is kind of centered around Jesus. And now, that may have been true, but probably for different reasons. Probably because he wouldn't stop screaming as a newly born baby who was cold in the Middle East, in the middle of a cave, right, that was probably damp. And so, but just think about this picture, right? You've got Mary here very close to her son because there's a cow coming in on her and she's like, Mama Bear. Okay, sorry. It doesn't take much to distract me. But you got Mary who has just given birth. Right? She's not wearing a clean robe. She's probably got a lot of other colors. I'm not going to go into what they are. right? So you've got Mary, and these kind of colors that you see on most nativity scenes are for wealthy people. They weren't wealthy people. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Joseph, who always looks old enough to be Jesus' great-grandpa, I don't know why that's the case, but Joseph probably delivered his own son with no help, no experience, trying to figure that out. And then you've got these dirty, nasty shepherds. If I'm Mary thinking, maybe supernatural epidural, that doesn't happen. Well, maybe God will send someone to tell us to tell the world that Jesus is here. Sure, you're gonna send the dirty, nasty guy who's got fleas? That's the choice? With his, and then you've got animals everywhere licking everything. I mean, just think about, before Jesus, when Joseph is, I don't know, this is the position to catch the baby, I guess, but while Joseph is delivering his son, right, there's a manger over there, and so while animals are eating out of it, think of him grabbing it, pulling it over, and setting Jesus in there with all sorts of mess and junk and germs in that straw. It's not clean straw. This is a dirty, nasty, filthy, messy picture. And if you really want your nativity scene at home to match this, you need to go buy a local ranch and get you a pile of dung and sit it next to it, because that's what it smelled like. You think I'm joking, but that's really true. Because here's what we do, right? Many times, we want to create a picture of Jesus that's polished. We want polished Jesus that we can hold up on a pedestal. Because if polished Jesus is there, then we can't connect with a polished Jesus. If Jesus understands our struggles, we don't have as many excuses. But polished Jesus, it's a lot easier to push away. Well, I'm no Jesus. I'm not perfect. And no, you're not, and he is the king of the universe. You're right. All those things are true. But imagine a world where we accepted that Jesus came to understand our struggles. Imagine a world where polished Jesus wasn't the way we tried to walk forward in life, where the number of people that have stopped walking into churches, the number of people is mind-blowing. The people who end up in my office or at a coffee shop or whatever, where we're having a conversation, why did you stop attending church 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Which is a lot of people that are sitting around you in your seats, right? They stopped at some point going to church for a long period of time and ended up here at Crossroads. Why did they stop coming? Because of polished Jesus. Because everything had to be perfect in that environment. Everything had to be just so. If it wasn't just right, then we couldn't be there on a Sunday or whatever day of the week they were worshiping. So maybe we do need to bring some dung in our homes. Maybe we need some cow patties to spice it up and have a conversation about what really it looked like at the first Christmas. This Christmas, maybe it's important for us to pay attention to the wrapping paper, because it's not what you would expect. Sometimes the gift isn't what we expect. The smell of odor and manure, the stench of animals. Look at the manger. It's dirty, nasty, noisy. As you think about the manger scene, remember that Jesus came into this world for each one of us. He came in an unexpected way as a king. He'd also go much further to demonstrate his love for each of us than anyone could have ever expected. From a humble manger scene to the scene of a cross. God used the unexpected to teach us the unexpected. God used the unexpected to teach us the unexpected. So whatever it is you're going through, Jesus understands that. He gets that struggle. That's the essence of the Christmas story. That's the picture for us to apply in our life this Christmas. If we could live out that Jesus understands our struggle, that Jesus isn't just some polished, perfect Jesus that the Middle Ages made him and we still carry in today, that every picture doesn't have even a hair. That's what I love about these manger scenes. Most of them have Jesus with Backstreet Boy hair. Right? The cattle are lowing. We just saw it just popped up on the screen. The cattle are lowing and no crying he makes. Come on, he's a baby. He's crying. He's fully human. But ask yourself the question over the next couple of weeks, where am I resisting Jesus? Where is it that I don't think he can actually help me because I think that he's too perfect to help? Well, yeah, I want to get involved when I need God's power, but he can't help me day to day. No, he can't. He lived it. No matter what your marriage state, no matter what the difficult circumstances are in your life, Jesus gets it. He understands you. How can that live out in your life this week, this month, this year, this Christmas season? I want to encourage you, if you have a family or grandkids or whatever, and you have a nativity scene like this one that hopefully will go home to the person that I left a note, Jesus will be back on Monday for. That's not really true. Or maybe it is, I don't know, it's fine. But as you surround the manger scene this Christmas, as you look around at the nativity set, maybe have a conversation with your family. What's it really look like? What's the real picture here? And how can I live that out in my life? Because God used a really unexpected entrance into the world to teach us a very unexpected lesson, that he understands our struggles, that he understands you, that it's an uncomfortable story, but he loves you too much not to tell it. Would you pray with me? God, we're grateful that you love us. We're grateful that you give us the opportunity to engage with your son, that he understands who we are and where we are, that you understand the struggles that we walk through because you've lived so many of them. Father, I pray today as many here in Odessa, those in Monahans or Andrews, or watching online, wherever they're at, as this message resonates in their hearts, maybe it bursts a bubble of the nativity scene they had been picturing for many years, or maybe it's not a new story, it's one they've embraced for a long time. Father, I just pray that however the story resonates in their hearts, that they would find an identifiable action step to applying you with them, that you understand them, that you can be invited into. You're not the last resort with just the power. When everything is so bad, we just need the power of God. No, you can walk with us on the journey because you've been there. You didn't have to do that, but you chose to humbly approach our world. And that's the story of Christmas. It's the story of the love you expressed for us, both in a manger and on a cross. And if you're here and have never accepted Christ or never accepted the love that Christ has for you, the meaning behind that, I want to encourage you to come find one of our pastors down in the front after our service and begin that relationship with him. Father, thank you for who you are. We ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.